The pen was already in my hand. I had just signed the bottom of the last moving box label, Maplewood Drive, final load, when my phone lit up on the kitchen counter. I almost ignored it. I thought it was my friend calling to ask if I needed help with the truck, but the name on the screen stopped me cold. It was Marcus, my notary. The message was 3 words long. Do not sign. I set the pen down. My fingers had gone numb. A second later, another buzz. This one from my brother Daniel. Hey, are you on your way? Dinner's ready. Mom's lawyer is here too. We figured we'd just get the transfer paperwork done tonight so you don't have to make another trip out. A smiley face at the end. Casual, warm, the way he always was right before he wanted something. I stood in the middle of my half-empty apartment in Ottawa and felt something shift in my chest. Not fear, exactly. More like the sound of ice cracking under your feet a half second before you realize you've walked too far out. I called Marcus back before I had time to think myself out of it. He answered on the first ring. His voice was tight in that particular way professionals get when they're trying to stay calm for your benefit. Sarah, he said, I need you to listen to me before you do anything else tonight. I sat down on a taped-up box and listened. Our mother had passed 11 weeks earlier. Ovarian cancer, diagnosed late, moved fast. She'd left behind a 4-bedroom house in Canada, the one we'd grown up in, the one our father had built the back deck on the summer before he died, and a registered account portfolio worth just over $400,000. She had split everything equally between me and my brother in her will. Daniel handled the estate because I was grieving and he offered and I was too exhausted to say no. What Marcus had found after I'd asked him to do a routine title search before we finalized the property transfer was not routine at all. There's a second document, he told me. Filed 8 weeks ago with the estate lawyer. Not my office, a different one your brother found on his own. It's a statutory declaration claiming that your mother verbally amended her wishes before she died. That she wanted the full property and the registered accounts to go to Daniel because, and I'm quoting the language here, you had estranged yourself from the family and caused your mother significant emotional distress in her final months. The room felt like it tilted sideways. That's not true, I said. I know, Marcus said. You were at that hospital 3 times a week. I've seen your mileage logs. But Sarah, the declaration has a witness signature from a woman named Pauline Gervais. Do you know who that is? I did. Pauline was Daniel's girlfriend's mother. She had come to our mother's bedside exactly once, in the last week, when our mother could barely speak. The transfer paperwork tonight, Marcus continued. If you sign it, you waive any future claim. Once your signature is on that document, the declaration becomes extremely difficult to challenge. He needs your signature to make this clean. That's why you're being invited to dinner. Drop a comment below right now. Have you ever been invited somewhere and realized halfway there that you were actually the target? Because I need to know I'm not the only one who missed the signs. I didn't cry. I had cried for 11 weeks straight. There were no tears left. What I felt instead was something clear and cold and absolutely focused, the way the air gets in January in Ontario right before a storm settles in. Still, almost quiet and completely unforgiving. I thought about the last 3 years. I thought about the family group chat where my messages would go mysteriously unread. The Christmas where Daniel had told me dinner was at 4, and then everyone had eaten at noon, and I arrived to empty plates and my mother looking confused about why I was late. The time I found out my mother's oncology appointment had been moved and nobody had told me. I'd driven 40 minutes to a hospital parking lot and sat there for 20 minutes before I called the clinic directly. Daniel had seemed so sorry. He hadn't been sure I'd written it down correctly. He worried about me sometimes. I was always so scattered. 3 years of small, quiet, perfectly deniable acts of erasure. I had blamed myself. I had gone to my doctor about my memory. I had started keeping a paper calendar because I thought maybe my phone reminders were glitching. I had apologized to my mother for missing that appointment, standing in her kitchen holding her hand, watching her look at me with something I hadn't been able to name then. I could name it now. It was pity. Not for me, for herself. Having one child who showed up and one child who was being slowly edited out of the picture. The fog lifted all at once and I saw it clearly. It wasn't carelessness. It was a campaign. Daniel had been managing my access to our mother for years, and I had thanked him for it because I thought he was holding the family together. He wasn't holding the family together. He was holding the inheritance together, and I was the variable he was trying to eliminate. I stood up. My legs felt steady in a way they hadn't in weeks. I called Marcus back. I'm going to dinner, I said. Silence on the line. Sarah, I'm not signing anything. But if I don't show up, he adjusts the plan. He finds another angle, another document, another way in. I need to see the full shape of it tonight. That's not. Can you call your contact at the Ontario Land Registry first thing tomorrow morning? Yes. And do you know an estate litigator who could take an urgent call tonight if I needed? He paused. My colleague, Denise. She's dealt with undue influence cases before. Send me her number. And Marcus, is there any chance the signature on that declaration is fraudulent? Another pause, longer. The witness date is the same day your mother was on a morphine-adjusted palliative protocol. She may not have had full testamentary capacity. That's worth examining. Then we have somewhere to start, I said. I'll call you when I leave the house. I didn't change out of my moving clothes. I didn't bring a bottle of wine. I grabbed my phone, my external battery, a small audio recorder I used for work meetings, and my mother's medical binder, the one I had kept since her diagnosis, with every appointment, every medication change, every care note written in my handwriting with dates. I put it all in my bag and I drove west on the 417 toward Canada. The house looked the same from the outside. The silver maple in the front yard was already starting to turn. My mother had planted it the year I was born. The porch light was on. There were 3 cars in the driveway. Daniel's truck, his girlfriend Renee's Civic, and a dark sedan I didn't recognize. I sat in my car for a moment and looked at the house. I had learned to ride a bike in that driveway. I had come home from the hospital after my appendix at 19, and my mother had made chicken soup from scratch. I had sat on the back deck with her the spring before she got sick, and we had talked for 4 hours about nothing and everything, and she had squeezed my hand when I left. This was still my house. Half of it was still mine. And I was not going to let it disappear. I got out of the car. Daniel opened the front door before I reached the steps. He was wearing the burgundy sweater I had given him for Christmas 2 years ago. His smile was wide and genuinely warm, the way it always was, and that was the most unsettling part. He was good at this. Sarah, hey, you found parking okay? It's the family driveway, Daniel. He laughed easily. Right. Come in, you look tired. Long day with the move? Something like that. The house smelled like roast chicken and garlic, our mother's recipe. Renee was in the kitchen. A man I didn't know was standing near the dining room table with a leather portfolio and a dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up. He was in his 50s, polished, the kind of man who smiled with his eyes without them actually warming. Sarah, this is Gerald Foss. He was handling Mom's estate on the legal side. Gerald extended his hand. So sorry for your loss. Your mother spoke about you a great deal. I shook his hand and said nothing. The dining table was set for 4. The paperwork was already fanned out near the head of the table. I clocked it immediately. Multiple pages, yellow sticky tabs on the signature lines, my name typed neatly above a blank. I set my bag on the chair beside me and sat down. We figured, Daniel said, carrying a basket of bread from the kitchen. Since Gerald was already coming for the registered account paperwork, we could just knock out the title transfer too. Save you a trip. You've got so much going on with the move. That's thoughtful, I said. Renee brought out the chicken. She didn't make eye contact with me once during dinner. I noticed that. Gerald made small talk about the market, about interest rates, about what a smart decision it was to liquidate the property given how strong the Ottawa market had been. He said the word streamline 4 times. He said your mother would have wanted this to be simple twice. I ate the chicken. I asked about the gravy. I let Daniel talk, and I listened. Because here's what 3 years of being gaslit teaches you. If you survive it intact enough to learn anything at all, the person running the script always thinks you're reading from it too. They believe their own story so completely that they stop watching for cracks. Daniel thought I was tired and grieving and grateful to have him managing the details. He thought I was going to pick up that pen. After the plates were cleared, Gerald opened the portfolio. So the registered accounts are the simpler piece, he said. The transfer paperwork there is fairly standard. And then for the property. Sarah, since you're the co-beneficiary, we just need your signature on the title transfer to Daniel as sole owner and on the accompanying statutory declaration confirming the verbal amendment to your mother's stated wishes. There it was, out loud, in the dining room of my mother's house, with her roasting pan still on the stove. The verbal amendment, I said. That's right, as witnessed and notarized. By Pauline Gervais. A beat. Very small. Gerald's smile didn't move. That's correct. On March 14th. I'd have to check the exact date. I can tell you the exact date, I said, because March 14th was the day my mother's palliative care team adjusted her morphine dosage to 15 milligrams every 4 hours. She was not lucid enough to amend a grocery list on March 14th, let alone her estate. I opened my bag and placed my mother's medical binder on the table. I have her medication records, care notes, and nursing assessments for every day of her final 3 weeks, signed by her care team at the Queensway Carlton. I set a printed email beside it. I also have an email from her oncologist from March 12th, 2 days before the alleged verbal amendment, documenting her cognitive state as significantly diminished. The room was very quiet. Daniel had stopped moving. Renee had walked to the doorway of the kitchen and stood there. "Sarah," Daniel said, and his voice had changed. The warmth was gone. Something careful and assessing had replaced it. "This doesn't need to be a fight. Mom wanted us to take care of each other," I said. "She told me that in February, when I was with her, alone at the hospital, the way I was 3 times a week for the last 4 months of her life." I looked at him. "I have the parking receipts, time-stamped." Gerald began shuffling papers back into his portfolio. "I also want a flag," I continued, "that I've shared all of this with my own notary, Marcus LeBlanc, and with an estate litigator who was retained at 8 o'clock this evening. Her name is Denise Okafor. She's already filed a notice of objection with the estate court preventing any transfer of the property or registered accounts pending investigation." Gerald closed the portfolio. Daniel pushed his chair back from the table. "You had no right to." "It's my mother's estate," I said. "I have every right. You're blowing this up over nothing. I was trying to make things easy." "You were trying to make things disappear," I said quietly. "There's a difference." Renee left the room. I heard her go upstairs. Daniel stared at me across the dining table in our mother's house, in the light of the chandelier she had bought at a garage sale and hung herself. And I watched him try to find the version of this where he still won. I watched him run through the calculations, and I watched him come up empty. "The declaration is fraudulent, Daniel," I said, not angry, just clear. "The witness wasn't competent to sign because Mom wasn't competent to speak. You know that. I know that. Gerald knows it too, which is why he's putting his paperwork away." Gerald said nothing. "What I don't know," I continued, "is how far you're willing to let this go. Because Denise has already told me that if we proceed to litigation, the costs come out of the estate before any distribution. That means the lawyers eat first. The house might have to be sold to cover it." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Or," I said, "we go back to the original will. Equal split. You get the property if you want to buy out my half at fair market value. The registered accounts get divided as written. We both walk away with what our mother actually intended. You would really do this to our family?" I looked at him for a long moment. "You did this to our family," I said. "I'm just the one who noticed." I picked up my bag. I left the medical binder on the table. "Give Denise a call in the morning," I said. "She's expecting to hear from you." I drove back to Ottawa in the dark on the 417 with all the windows cracked open, even though it was cold enough to see my breath. The highway was quiet. The city glittered on the horizon like a circuit board. I called Marcus and told him what had happened. And when I was done, he was silent for a moment. And then he said, "You handled that better than most people twice your age." I didn't feel triumphant. I felt wrung out and hollowed and deeply, bone-achingly sad. Not for myself. For the version of my brother who used to push me on that tire swing in the backyard and call me Sarah Bear and make me laugh so hard at Christmas dinner that I'd cried. I didn't know when he had decided I was an obstacle instead of a sister. Maybe it was when our father died and he became the man of the family and liked it too much. Maybe it was when the house values in Kanata started climbing. Maybe it was before any of that. Maybe the warmth had always been a performance and I'd been too close to see it. Money doesn't corrupt people. It just removes the reason to pretend. 6 months later, the estate was settled. Denise found 2 additional problems with Gerald's documentation: inconsistencies in the notarization seals that were referred to the Law Society of Ontario. Gerald Foss is no longer practicing. The statutory declaration was ruled invalid. The original will was upheld in its entirety. I took my half of the registered accounts and put them in a TFSA. My half of the property was bought out by Daniel at appraised value. He wanted the house, and I let him keep it. I didn't want to fight over the silver maple. I just wanted my share of what my mother meant for me to have. What I kept that mattered more than any of it was the back porch table. The small one she had painted yellow. I'd put it on my new balcony, and in the mornings I have my coffee there, and I think about her. Daniel and I haven't spoken since the night I left that medical binder on the dining room table. Sometimes I think I should reach out. Then I remember 3 years of calendar invites that disappeared and hospital appointments nobody mentioned, and a Christmas dinner I arrived late to that I was never supposed to arrive to at all. Some relationships don't survive the truth. That's not a tragedy. That's the truth. Doing its job. What I know now. What I wish I had understood before I spent 3 years apologizing to my own reflection is that confusion is sometimes a symptom, not a character flaw. If the people around you are always certain, and you are always the one who got the date wrong, misread the message, misremembered the plan, ask yourself who benefits from your doubt. Because someone always does. Trust your instincts. Get your own lawyer. Keep your own records. And if someone invites you to dinner to sign papers, make sure you know exactly what you're signing before you ever pick up the pen.